We're going to get started with our workshop now. Thank you all for coming out. This is an amazing workshop. We billed it as a joint workshop, but it's actually a tripartite workshop. And so this is a workshop. We've got many members of our City Council, our Planning Commission, and our Board of Zoning Appeals. And so this is an important workshop. I'm so glad that and appreciate everybody taking the time, especially commissioners and council members, to show up to our workshop tonight. The intent of this workshop is to talk about...
Can we have a Kim come to the table so we can see? I have some questions I'd like to ask him.
Kim, you're welcome to join us.
Save your seat right here.
All right.
Man, can you tell them what I discussed with you?
Okay, so let me clarify what we're doing tonight. We have been working on a community plan update for quite some time now, and you've heard us refer to the timeline that we are on, hopeful to complete that at the end of the summer. So this workshop is in response to the suggestion by our commissioners, Commissioner Hedrick in particular, that we can't wait necessarily to keep working on our regulations and ordinances. We can't wait for all that to happen. But what will happen as part of the community plan update is we will produce an updated community plan, an update of what is currently the land use and transportation plan. That plan will have a number of policies in there, and it will also have some recommendations for implementation. If you go and look at the plan as it currently sits, you'll see that it has a number of land use policies in there, some of which have never been acted upon, and it has recommendations for implementation. So it is a long-range type of plan. What we're going to talk about tonight, I think, are some things that we might be able to continue to look at and update in a shorter time frame. And so I think that's the intention of our workshop tonight. We will have sort of two sections here. First section will be existing regulations that might be needed to be modified, and another are new regulations. So we have things that are happening in our community, much like other communities, that we haven't addressed so far. One of the things, I'll just give you an example, tiny homes is a trend that we see out there. It doesn't really directly appear in our regulations, but it's an example of something new that's out there that we might need to be thinking about and have on the radar. So the first area, this is what will happen in this meeting, is we will brainstorm through some of these ideas. I've got a whole list of things that we've sort of had a discussion on previously, and then we will attempt to prioritize a little bit after we get done with our brainstorming. So we'll start with existing regulations that needs to be modified, and then we'll talk a little bit about new regulations that we might need, and then we'll spend a little bit of time at the end to prioritize these things. So some of these things will go to the Planning Commission. That's where the technical expertise and the competency resides. Some of these things might go to the City Council, and we'll need to try to figure out what goes where, and generally get these things on a timeline so that we can try to get them accomplished. And importantly, we all have limited time. We have a lot of goodwill, a lot of volunteers, but we need to work on the most important things first. So I'd like to finish by about 8:30, no later than 8:30. I told my wife I'd be home. But of course, we'll go as long as we need, but we've had some whopper sessions, and so I'm grateful for y'all's time. And we'll try to keep this first discussion. I think it'll be a little bit longer. We'll shoot to maybe wrap that up in about a half an hour, about 7:45. And then we'll spend a little time on new regulations, till maybe a little bit after 8 o'clock. And then we'll need probably at least 15 minutes at the end to prioritize. Commissioners, does that sound like an okay approach? All right. So let me kick us off on new regulations, or existing regulations need to be modified. Some of these things might not need discussion at all, but we did have another workshop workshop on the priorities for this commission. And so one of the things that we're going to be working on, I think it's one of our higher priorities, is updating our municipal code to be explicit about planning commissioners and modernizing. You heard me talk about it a little bit earlier, and I've been talking about it almost every meeting. So be explicit that planning commissioners are approved by the Board of Commissioners or something along that line. So right now, planning commissioners are appointed by the mayor. That's the way a lot of communities do it. And other communities are recommended by the mayor and approved, nominally approved by Board of Commissioners. But we have had some discussion and a desire by the city commissioners to do that. So that's one of the existing regulations I think we've already discussed a little bit about. I'll run through these and then I'll open it up to other folks that might have things on their list. And we'll just add to the list. Another one we've talked about is B3 and B1, adding back residential. And so when we updated the zoning ordinances for our business types, we added a B3 zoning type. And when we did that, we took out residences from B1 and B3. Now, since doing that, I've had heard a lot of suggestions that maybe we ought to put that back in. We want to encourage people to live in Townsend. I've expressed my concern that we don't have, we lose the balance of full-time folks that live here in Townsend. And so one way to do that would just be to allow residences with, whatever provisions we need. And so that's one of the things that I have on my list is adding residences back to B1 and B3. Of course, they're already covered in B2 with the neighborhood business district. Another one that's been discussed over time, we still need to act on, the noise ordinance in the municipal code. We had talked about adding content neutral thresholds, something that would be enforceable more along the lines of the lighting ordinance. So if you're familiar with the lighting ordinance, it has a certain number of candle feet that have to be observed at the property line with respect to lighting. And many communities have done something similar with respect to noise. Right now, our ordinance talks about noise by different types. So yelling, for example. I don't know how you would sort of find that. I don't think I'm very loud about yelling, but it doesn't seem like it's very objective. We could probably come up with a more modern standard. Lighting ordinance. There's a lot of things in the lighting ordinance that people have suggested. This won't be the only one, but I have had people suggest to me that some communities only allow uplighted signs. So we have a number of uplighted signs. What that means is you got your sign here and then you have lights that shine up and illuminate the sign that way, rather as opposed to a backlit sign. That the light bulb is inside and it's lit from the back. And so that's one thing that's been suggested on the lighting ordinance. Driveway ordinance, we talked about that tonight. I don't know if we need to talk much more about that in this workshop. And then it was suggested at one point that we would look at the exceptions for occupying an RV. So right now we have a general prohibition on occupying. You can store your RV, but you cannot occupy it in the city limits. And so that's one that's been come up for some discussion. So let me stop there, commissioners, and see if y'all have anything else that you'd like to add to this list on existing regulations to be modified.
I do.
Yes, sir.
The RV park and campground regulations need serious rework, and I've been working on it. And I'll be happy to give you guys a marked up copy soon.
Okay, is it just a lot of little things, or is there a theme to your?
A lot more stuff.
When you start reading this stuff, it's really messed up. I mean, there's two paragraphs. Like this paragraph says the exact same thing as this paragraph. You turn the page, this page says you can't do it. You turn the page, it says you can do it.
Yeah, we need to look
The whole
for
book.
ambiguity in our regulations.
So I've got a lot of suggestions, and I've been working on it, and I'll give it to you guys, and you can throw it away, you can modify it, you can do whatever you want. But I've been working on it, and I'll be giving it to you.
Okay.
The second thing I have is I truly believe that the city commission needs to review all of the site plan approvals that the planning commission makes, and that they're not official until the city commission reviews them and approves them. Those are elected officials that need to be on the hook for those site plans,
Is this all site plans? or-
all site plans.
Okay.
We spend half of a meeting going over festival permits that affect the city on one weekend. I think we can spend time going over site plan approvals
Okay.
that affect the city for years.
Okay, this is brainstorming, so we're just going to get different items. We'll go around and see if they have any traction, and then we'll try to prioritize.
Comment, may I, in this one? On what Pat said about, someone said, why does the Board of Commissioners need to approve something by the Planning Commission? As a citizen, and I'm talking now nationally, it's very frustrating to see legislation that is trying to be upheld that was never voted on by citizens. Never had anything by the people that we elected that they farmed out to others. And I think to say, especially in a small constituency like we are, the Board of Commissioners who were elected by the people should know what is being approved of in Townsend. And I think we're going to see the exact ramifications of that with the Blount County Partnership and that, and the issues that we're talking about.
Okay,
If it
so
was, so I'm agreeing with Pat that I
You're
think
supporting-
that all site plans
supporting-
regardless, and that it can be cursory, I mean,
Okay.
but I think that when, if I am as a citizen, I'm going to go to you or to the other people on the Board of Commissioners and say, why, what, who? And if you say, well, the Planning Commission decided on it, it's like, I didn't elect the Planning Commission. So to your point also, having the Planning Commission approved by the entire Board of Commissioners is along those same lines.
okay, we'll work through that one. Let me go ahead and see if I can get any other ideas from commissioners, councilmen, Chairman Talbot.
Speaking with Doug, he recommended that we look at the building permit, how it's issued, how it's executed, in regards to the length of time that building permits should be active or inactive. Right now, it seems as though once somebody pulls a permit, they have 1 year in order to break ground, but they have no closing time to complete the development. And that could leave open developments that maybe never get completed, could be a blight or an eyesore on the community.
Okay,
So maybe look at the building permit.
building permit, no closing time.
Yeah, the time and the cost, and if they have to reapply, what the reapplication cost might be, things of that nature.
Sounds good?
Go over B1, B2, B3, just kind of give it an overhaul.
I have some questions about B3. That's why I was wanting to ask again. B3, even though we may not want certain businesses, we still have to have a place for those businesses to be in our city, correct? Or we are opening ourselves up for a lawsuit.
Yeah, you cannot indiscriminately disallow any use. You have to make provisions for that new use to exist.
Is that a planning opinion or a legal opinion?
Illegal.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not
That's
giving
what
you
I
the
thought.
legal opinion.
But I think this is my general understanding too. It's very difficult to prohibit types of permitted uses. If you look at our existing code now, there are types of uses in there that historically have been considered, somewhat controversial. You still have to permit them, but you can put a lot of caveats around that and a lot of guidance around that. But legally, I believe it's very difficult to just come right out and say you can't do certain things. And I'm aware that we have certain things in our code right now that say that they're prohibited, but I'm not sure if those certain permitted uses are legal test.
We don't have to allow every noxious use in the world in Townsend because they want to do it. That's incorrect.
Well, there's a way around it. Let's take this as an example. Ferris wheels, folks in Townsend say, we don't want a big Ferris wheel. We can say, yeah, you can have a Ferris wheel in Townsend.
We can limit Ferris wheels by limiting height, for example.
Let me finish.
Your ways.
So what you do is say you can have a Ferris wheel, but it has to be inside of a building. And it has to be soundproof. And we have a height
Exactly.
requirement of 36 feet. So who's going to build a Ferris wheel inside of a building that's soundproof? So, but we can't say you cannot build a Ferris wheel in the city of Townsend. So it's a roundabout way, but you can do it.
You have to think of everything.
We can say you can't build an outside Ferris wheel in the city of Townsend. We can say that.
Well, I believe the legal stuff is pretty clear on permitted uses. It's a high bar to prohibit any certain type of permitted use. So, but there are ways that you can address certain types of uses, like we've done in our code already.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, and one other way that gives you the most latitude is by adopting design standards. So that allows for more subjective interpretation, but it also gives you some latitude to try and attain a certain sort of standard. And the one standard that gives you a lot of latitude is aesthetic standards by the institution of the Design Review Board.
I agree that our ordinance and our practice has been largely to allow most anything to come in town, but we can exclude various types of uses that are noxious, that are dangerous. Health, safety, and welfare is a basic consideration that we're overlooking in the discussion right now with regards to what could be allowed and what couldn't be allowed. Anything that upsets the health, safety, and welfare considerations of the city would be able to be excluded. That's already pretty clear. These other items may be not quite so clear, but
I don't think that's accurate, but if we want to generate a list of things that we think can be prohibited, I'm happy to generate that list and send it to the city attorney and let him advise us on that.
I have one other question for you while you're here, because I don't get to make it to a planning commission too often. Once that property, if we made, say we made from V Hollow to KOA B3, once that property is all bought up, then we can say if a Suboxone clinic came in, we could say this is the area you could put it, but once that's sold, then they would either have to try to buy land from that, or would we have to expand our B3?
No, you wouldn't have to expand your B3. That is the reason why you have zones, and these zones are designated areas. So let's say, for example, you would not allow a liquor store to be right next to an elementary school, and you could use health and safety standards to do that.
So once that property's bought up, then no
Yes, it's
other
financed.
B3s could come back into our city?
Well,
Once that property's bought?
Well, if there's a pattern of land use that suggests that something could be changed, then the city within some reason should provide the reason why they would want to change a land use pattern to adapt to its dynamic changes.
Okay.
But if there's no indication of, let's say you have the B3 and it's all full up, and somebody says, I want to put a B3 in, you can't go and say that because of that, I'm going to go take something in R1 and allow you to do that there.
Okay.
It's not in keeping with the character of that particular neighborhood or that particular adjoining uses. So yes, the idea is that the zone should be where you would allow certain uses.
Okay.
And you don't have to leap ahead or bend over backwards to create more just because somebody wants to have that sort of use.
All right. And one other question. If we B3, say V Hollow to KOA, do we have to do both sides of the road, or can we just keep it on
You
one
can
side?
do
of the
either
road?
side. You can do a portion of it. You don't have to even do the entire thing.
Okay.
You just have to decide what that geographic area is, and that there's a pattern or there's a conformity, not a conformity, but there's a dynamic pattern
They're
that
all
suggests.
campgrounds, so
There you
we're
go.
all, at this point, if we had a B3, they all would be in that B3 section.
Exactly.
That's why I was curious.
Exactly.
Can we-
But the one thing that you have to be careful to understand is that there's a distinction between what is a permitted use and what is a non-conforming use.
Okay.
A non-conforming use is typically something that has probably been grandfathered, but it's not permitted. So then the idea is that with something like that, you might want to graduate all the non-conforming uses to permitted uses by virtue of decree in this particular district.
Thank you, sir.
I have a bit of a problem using their lawyer as a zoning administrator and telling us what we can have and what we can't have in town. We need to have a lawyer, and I know Will has been with us for 20 years, but we need to have a lawyer that will argue for us and help us to have what we want to have rather than anything anybody else might want to put into the city.
Yeah, I think the purpose of the planning commission is to develop the policies, the land use policies, those general things that are broad guidance that inform the regulation of the municipal code. The lawyer has a role in advising us what is legal and what's not legal, what we're going to get sued on or not. And so there is a role for the lawyer. He's not in charge of developing the land use policy, but he is in charge of saying you can legally do this or you can't. And we can still go against that advice. He's an advisor. So we did, you know.
But you are opening yourself up.
But you
for
are
loss.
opening yourself up to, you know, some legal jeopardy.
That's not, again, mostly North Carolina experience, but you may exclude certain uses within your city. Again, let's get back to health, safety, and welfare. That's basic reasons that we do exclude things, and that's perfectly legal. There are other reasons that also would allow it, things to be excluded.
Well, that's why I'm saying that if you wanted to put a liquor store next to an elementary school, you could, on the grounds of health and safety, do that. I'm saying that you cannot carpet bag and say that no, we're not going to allow this use, full stop, because we don't want it. You have to have reasons and things in place to control it.
Our reasons will be in the land use plan, and they'll be in the form of policy, and we will then have the authority to do that.
There you go. So therefore,
That's the way it works.
So therefore, what you have on the books right now is what the lawyer will tell you is legal or not, or that puts you in jeopardy of being sued or not. If you have an issue with that, then you change your instrument. But the lawyer...
You can amend the land use plan. The lawyer is not all powerful in these circumstances. Planning matters are argued frequently at every level of the courts.
That's not what we're saying. I'm saying that based on what you have on the books, the lawyer will tell you if it's legal or not, and whether you need to change it. Now, if you need to change it, then you change it. So for example, if you have an instrument that says you can't allow mobile homes, now in Tennessee, you can't do that. The only way you can provide some control of it is to make sure that it has clear construction and has some sense of permanency. But you cannot say that we can allow them full stop. So a lawyer then will advise you that if you don't want to get into trouble, you should consider doing this. And then the city would go about to develop those regulations that allow for a modular manufactured home to be put in a residential area because it has acquired some level of clear construction or some permanency. And on top of that, you could also add some aesthetic standards, like saying that it can be this sort of siding, it should be this sort of siding, or the foot should be of a certain brick, so that every modular home has some consistency in terms of design. That's all.
One thing that clearly you can't do is exclude all use of a piece of property. Now, there may have been more legislation, that's the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court. You can't exclude all uses for a single piece of property, which is a taking.
Yes.
But certain other, you can, if the Tennessee law now says you must allow manufactured housing within your town, it doesn't say you can't severely limit the amount of manufactured homes you might have within your town. You might have a 5-acre piece of property And you might have it zoned in such a way as to where, well, we're gonna allow manufactured home, but on 5 acres, you can only have one manufactured home. We could do that.
Yeah, we're not arguing against that, I'm not arguing.
Okay, we're going to have to make sure we move it around.
I just want to say one thing to back the mayor up here. We're getting off in the weeds here with these particular topics. Let's build a list of short time, of these existing regulations and new regulations, and then we'll discuss those.
Yeah, but let's continue our brainstorming. So, the last one I had is about the building permit no closing time. Mr. Martin, did I miss anything that you wanted to
No, I
add?
just
You were
had-
just asking
I
general
just had some
questions.
questions about B3. I wanted some clarification
Okay.
on.
B1, B2, B3 overhaul.
And what does that mean?
Kind of like what was just being discussed.
You want to relook at all the permitted uses across all 3 businesses?
Yeah.
I think,
I think campgrounds should be pulled out of B3.
Okay.
so that's one consideration.
Yeah, that's a very specific thing. So you can have, pulling campgrounds
Put
out
it
of
in
B3.
B4.
Um,
It's like big box stores, pain clinics, all these things that we don't want in the campground.
Yeah, we had quite a discussion on that.
Right.
Um,
And then
if-
also in here, in these rules, it says that we cannot, outdoor recreation amusements including, but not limited to, go-kart, race cars, bumpers, heliports, airports. So what we just talked about, saying that we can't do something, it's here.
Okay. Let me try to address this one. Very specific things we can do very quickly. Okay, if we want to put homes back in B1 and B3, we can do that, take the campgrounds out. If we want to do a complete overhaul or complete relook at B1, 2, and 3, all of our business district zoning, that's going to take a long time, and it might not allow us to get to other things. But if that's the will of the commission, and we'll be the ultimate deciders, it's a workshop where we're brainstorming. But if that is the will of the city council, that that's the most important thing, and we're going to set aside all these other things, then we can do that. But just recognize that when you're making a suggestion, the more smaller targeted things could actually maybe be done a little bit more quickly.
There is one thing about, in the 2011 series, there was a sentence here that says, "The site plan shall be reviewed by the planning commission for conformance with the site plan regulations," which we do, and to determine if they are keeping with the comprehensive planning program of Townsend. That seems to have been lost the last time we rewrote B1, B2, B3.
Okay, so you want to,
Consider whether a line like that belongs in here. We're spending $100,000 for the community plan. This would be a place to perhaps reference it.
okay. In general, the planning commission should be informed by the land use and transportation plan. You can underscore that by adding something in the zoning ordinance. And remember that the community plan is really intended to look comprehensively at all the business and all the residential as well. So it's what else we have? Light industrial, and we actually have other types of zoning. So there is an effort to look comprehensively.
I just
but-
think that
but
got
that's-
missed when we looked at B1, B2,
Okay.
B3.
Yeah, referencing the land use and transportation plan.
So-
Okay. What other
What the
ideas?
CPAC is doing is just taking this and updating it? Is
Correct.
this what, okay. So
Correct.
that we're not getting a new one, we're taking this one and updating it.
The charge from the planning commission was for the CPAC to update the existing land use and transportation plan using the same format. So they're not reinventing the wheel, and so we have continuity. But
And
that
so
it
they
can
can-
have a lot of new ideas in there.
Oh, sure. And also, when changes are made or suggestions are made, have it like how Akeem put this, what he emailed out, so you can put the comments to the side. So when changes are made, you can say, this was changed from, well, campgrounds were moved from B3 to B1 or whatever. So we have some sort of record. Because right now, we have no record.
We don't know what's
We
been
don't know
changed.
what's up, we don't know what's down.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. Okay, other items, existing regulations that need to be modified.
I think signs.
signs.
Signs, okay, yeah, I thought I had signs on here, but I don't. Well, I do, about lighting signs. What should we put on signs?
They just need to be consistent. And, you know, I've always had a problem with what I call like a vinyl sign stuck on up. Just stuck up there, not really a permanent sign. So I just think there needs to be a good standard.
Okay, we do have something in the existing sign ordinance.
Yeah,
Mr.
8-308 is the sign regulations. Now,
Mr.
whether they're enforced is another story.
That's right. So we have good ordinances, hopefully, and we're going to get better. But then there's also the step about, are you enforcing what you have?
Right.
And so Mr. Ogle does an excellent job. I'm so pleased with the work of Mr. Ogle. But he has to have stuff in the ordinance to go by. And then, because he's got limited time, we have to help prioritize his work. So in terms, when you're talking about enforcement, you have to do it using the ordinances. You have to enforce what's on the books. And there is something in there about vinyl signs.
Yeah,
Maybe we need to,
back when we started 20 years ago, you could have the vinyl backlit sign and you could have up lighting. So those things would flip-flop back and forth over the years, and I don't really recall exactly which way they flipped.
those new signs are pretty inexpensive now, so people can get those at the drop of a hat. Is that what you're going for? Is the new vinyl sign might not look very good, or?
Kind of like banners.
What?
Vinyl banners.
Yeah, well,
Exactly.
Banners, because we put.
like Good Vibes, what they had, I didn't
Yeah,
think
it's
was
the band,
acceptable,
yeah.
and I think even the breakfast place, I don't think they have a great sign. Just, I think it brings the city down to look at those
Okay.
terrible
It could be
signs.
something as simple as putting like some kind of permanent materials or some kind of material standard.
Yeah.
Materials, okay, I got it, materials standard.
That way they'll get a piece of plywood, just spray paint.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
what else?
did you say we were going to go through lighting?
Say again?
Lighting, is that on your list? The light ordinance?
Oh, right,
Light?
lighting.
L-I-G-H-T.
Sorry, Pat, I didn't bring my hearing aids.
I didn't bring that megaphone.
Okay, on the lighting ordinance, I've got one thing, to look at the lighting ordinance and see about allowing only uplit signs. Is there something else you'd like to look at on the lighting?
I think the proliferation of string lighting is an issue.
String lighting.
For instance, my string lights have shields on them, so they only shine downward. They don't cost much. It seems like we're just letting people put string lights wherever they want, and it takes out from dark sky initiative.
They're actually prohibited.
String lights are prohibited.
So I think we need
Let's
to
take a
look at
that.
those.
Okay.
And
If we find that we've got a good ordinance already and we're just not using it. then
But I think
that's-
the shielding is important too because of the dark sky initiative.
Shielding, I would like to second that, because I have seen other communities where shielding is used a lot more effectively, and it really makes a big difference. I mean, you've got light where it needs to be, and it's just not, going everywhere.
just like the bank there, the people who live right behind there, they are flooded with light now, and nothing's being done.
Yeah, that's
We
what I
might
was-
want to limit up lighting because of its effect on migratory
Right, it's all like
Horse
information.
and birds.
Our lighting standard specifies downlighting.
Downlighting.
To create the first house.
Okay. There's a difference between uplighting and downlighting.
Otherwise, it gets reflected off the surface and up in the atmosphere. So downlighting would be facing down toward the sign and hit the ground.
Okay, so only to allow downlighting.
I believe that's the way that we are ordinances are now.
Might already
That's the way it
be.
is, Mike.
And then,
It might just be an enforcement issue then.
and then there's some lights, that are, they're coming out, that go beyond the property line. Or some,
Bleaching and what?
Huh?
Bleed over?
yeah.
Bleed
Or like when you're driving, there's some businesses that are really, really bright.
Okay. Yeah, so shielding would help on that. So shielding, bleed over. I noticed something the other day. They're replacing streetlights, and these new LED streetlights are quite powerful. One of my neighbors got one of these things. It's all lit up down there where it used to be not as bright down there.
So maybe-
The LED lights would be quite powerful, so then it's important where that light goes.
You have
May I
something?
quickly say something? If you want to see how a good lighting ordinance works, one evening when it's dark on Alcoa Highway, across Alcoa Highway from the airport, if you stand there and look at the burgeoning new Alcoa new downtown, where they have the Food Lion and the apartments, if you look at that landscape, you see that the lighting is very muted. The place is lit, but it's not, offensive.
Is that because of the intensity of the light or the shielding or what makes it?
Well, whatever it is, what I'm trying to suggest is that we learn from them. So maybe somebody can go to the city of Alcoa. I will do it also as well, but to figure out how they have achieved that muted lighting for the downtown area where Food Lion is and the apartments across from the airport.
I think there are some communities that have done it really well.
Right here, it says, all luminaries shall be directed towards the ground. Shielding of the light source shall be used to ensure that illumination is not directed upward and that it does not radiate upon other properties. And the bank does not go by that.
As an example.
Okay, so maybe our regulation is already pretty
It's
good
just not being.
on that, it's just that it's an enforcement issue. Well, Mr. Ogle works during the daytime, so we might have to figure out a way to supplement what happens at night.
When he leaves tonight.
Okay. All right, but it's a good example. So if our ordinances are actually pretty good already, then, maybe we need to focus somewhere else and just think about enforcement. So,
Okay, my suggestion would be to have, call a workshop and say we're gonna look at chapters 2, 3, and 4. And then everyone looks and does a deep dive, it's 2, 3, and 4. And everybody will know what's in here. And without writing new things, we'll cover things we already have.
well, I think what we're trying to do here is to utilize our common expertise. That's the benefit of having everybody around the table. And then we'll know which chapters are the most important, and we'll go back and do what you're suggesting. I think that's how it's going to go. Anything else we want to put on the table? I want to move to new regulations, things.
I have had a couple of questions about the lemonade signs that are put out, that are moving signs, but I do not see where it talks about signage that is moving inside the sign, but it doesn't talk about flags or those moving. Yeah, they're floppy. They just kind of blow in the wind. They say lemonade or whatever, barbecue and stuff like that. I don't see that in our codes.
Okay.
Other than the moving, it's just the standing signs. It says signs, motion, movement, is all it says. But in our ordinance for food trucks, it says you're allowed one sandwich board type sign. So is that flag considered a sign, or how would it be regulated, or is it okay to be put out as long as it's not on the right of way?
Well, I think nothing can be on the right of way.
That's what I say, as long as it's not on the right of way,
Right.
is that allowed?
Nothing on the right of way. And a sandwich board is like this. It's not moving, it's flopping, or it's not flopping.
Right, that's in our
Okay.
mobile food truck thing. So it just says the sandwich board, but what about advertising? Are we going to allow?
Like a little floppy man? thing?
Not the floppy man necessarily, it's just a sign, kind of like a flag. That's
Oh, the little thing that flutters, what do you call those? Mr. Ogle?
The floppy flags.
Yeah, the floppy flags.
Feather flags.
Feather flags.
Nether flags, that's a good
Yes, are we allowing those or not allowing those? Because it is movement, but it's not a stationary sign. Our ordinance just talks about a stationary sign.
I would think it's a stationary sign.
Yeah, because they're not permanent, they're usually just there for a short time, right?
Well, I don't know, sometimes they do there a long time. Mr. Ogle, what's your input on this?
The way the ordinance is written, movement is not allowed. Which, does that include the American flag, the Tennessee flag?
Well, that's a flag on a...
It's a flag, but it's also a
It's a flag
sign.
on a flagpole, not a... I guess you have to distinguish between a flag and a sign. Now, we have a definition for what a sign is. I don't think a sign is a flag. But we might need to look at that.
I've been in a meeting where somebody talked about having a flag made with their logo and put up on their flagpole. So you
Yes,
can't just dismiss it.
That
All
has
right.
been brought to my attention.
We're gonna call them floppy flags unless somebody's got a different term.
Feather flags.
Feather flags, sorry, feather flags, and we'll take a look at it and see
Can
if,
you not insert the word advertising in there in some way? The United States flag is not an advertisement per se, so it's a symbol.
that's a good,
So
okay.
But what would a UT flag be?
They're really signs.
Okay.
it's not well, I guess it is, isn't it? So Bill, what did you
I
say?
don't want to get into weeds here, but we got 2 pages of what the definition is, 3 pages on what a sign is,
Yeah.
okay?
Well, this just says, I lost it here.
We covered advertising.
It just says electrical signs are prohibited, as are signs that flash, reflect motion, pictures, emit smoke, vapor, produce any rotation, motion, or movement. Each mobile vehicle is permitted 1 sandwich board, and that's what it talks about, but it doesn't say anything about those feather flags. But it is movement, but it's not a electrical sign.
Okay,
So we
Yeah,
do
you
need
can-
to visit that
okay.
probably pretty quickly, because food vendors will be back up here, and that is when it, an issue.
Okay, we'll take a look at it, okay?
How about those, the blinking open signs? Does that count as something they're not supposed to have?
I
They're
don't think the
electric
lights are
and they
supposed to blink. I think they
They're
can
electric and
say
they blink.
on, but I don't think they're supposed to blink.
They are not. Who
They're
has
not.
one that's blinking?
We-
Or
we-
if it kind
we-
of rolls across.
Scrolling is fine.
Oh,
What?
Scrolling is fine.
the
But
blinking.
blinking is not.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of curvy roads through the main where there will want to be a lot of signs, but do we have covered lighting within the line of sight of the roadway that might otherwise blind the driver?
Okay, I'm gonna put that up there, lighting, blind, impairing, driver. We'll take a look at that one. Okay.
Because I think based on that, it's kind of like when you have a roundabout, you have lighting at the roundabout, so you have less, you have transition lighting, but then that's
Let's morph over into new regulations. So here's what I've got on my list for new regulations. Tiny homes, semi-rigid structures and campgrounds, overnight rentals, registration.
slow.
Oh, I can start
Somebody's
again.
taking notes down.
I'll start again. Tiny homes,
Okay.
semi-rigid structures and campgrounds. These are all things we've talked about before. My list is nothing new. This is trying to remember what we've talked about.
Okay.
Overnight rentals, registration and licensing, and corridor management. These are new things. What Kim was mentioning about mobile homes is also probably something we need to tackle. That might be existing regulations or something about this that's, you've presented it before, Kim.
We have a mobile home in town. Can it be limited to that area of town? We have a place, we're not saying we can't come here. And also tiny homes,
Well,
would they be considered manufactured homes?
I think what Kim is telling us is that the lines are blurred between manufactured homes, different types of manufactured homes. People built something called cartridge homes. It's a little bit like the old Sears and Roebuck. You can order it out of a catalog. You can order your kitchen, you can order your bathroom, a few bedrooms. It all gets delivered and put together.
That's what Mr. Acker's doing, right?
So,
Yeah.
but the lines are blurring, and there is a relatively new law in Tennessee that has to do with mobile homes. So we may need to make sure that our regulations are compliant with the new law in Tennessee. So I'm going to put mobile homes on here just so we can have it on our list. What else, commissioners?
I think everybody at the table got a message from me over the last week or so with regards to bringing in or inviting members of the General Assembly in to tell us about new legislation. I think we have a few things we'd really like to talk about. We could send out an invitation to Stinnett and Moon and Hatchett and have them come in and tell us about new legislation being considered that affects planning in Tennessee. We'd really enjoy that opportunity to talk to them. When I wrote that memo, that was to you guys, that was February 5th. At that time, I had a pile of papers sitting next to me that I hadn't gotten to yet, the Maryville paper, the Daily News. I picked that up after writing that message indicating we needed to do that and realized, the city of Knoxville did this on February 3rd. Well, the Knoxville representatives are not our representative, and they owe us something for votes and for the support that we give them to get them into the General Assembly. So the very idea of having them in to explain to us what they're doing in the General Assembly as they represent us would be an excellent idea, I think. And we can give them a Pepsi and a cookie and make them happy and get some questions answered on that and everything else.
I think that's a great idea.
I think it's a good suggestion. I am aware that their time is limited when the legislature's in session. So the legislature's in from January to April. That's when those guys are having to spend time in Nashville. It's not to say that they're not back in their district, but I think it's an excellent idea to try to engage a little bit more with some of our
What they
state
often do, and this is based on my experience again in another state, but North Carolina, when legislature's in session, they start session at noon on Monday, and they adjourn on Thursday for the week. So they've got Fridays. We need to look into their schedule, find out when they might be available and home, and see if we can bring them in. It doesn't have to be lengthy if they're afraid of that. Also, they have tremendous resources at their command. It's not like they're going to have to memorize everything that's been going on. They can get a printout or information from Bill Draft, for example, that will tell them what's been happening, and or they can have their staff do it.
I think what we need, we have bandwidth issues too within the city, but we do have lots of folks with experience in our community, yourself included. And so if there's something that you want to scope out, a paper that would help us to get there and that you could help us with, maybe you can be the one to draft the invitations and send them out on behalf of the city. We can empower you to do that. But it does come down, it's a great idea, but it needs to have bandwidth to support it. And, we can, if you're not interested, we can find somebody and you can coach them.
Okay.
So, I think one of the nice things, we talk about our demographic. We had this discussion in another group that I participated in town, and we were talking about children. And we have children in the city, but we don't have as many children as we used to. And, our demographic in the city and in our community is changing. But there's some good things about that. So we have people that are quite knowledgeable, and they also have time. And so we have tremendous volunteerism, here in Townsend with some of our retired folks. And so if there's opportunities to help them to help us to get engaged, it's an opportunity to embrace our demographics.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Incorporating our right-of-ways of the county, bring the right-of-ways into the city, and only because, if no other reason, is to regulate the ingress, the egress of, you can regulate the ingress, egress of those roads.
We do.
Campbell does a lot of that. They go all the way out to Glenn's Corner now, and it's just the right-of-way. But they can control that, who goes in and out of the right-of-way.
We do have a license agreement with TDOT for the bike path, which is on part of the right-of-way. And we're taking a look at that right now in terms of, how we might update that arrangement.
I'm talking about some of the county road, just the right away.
Myers Road.
Myers Road in particular.
Okay.
Now, I sat in on Farragut, so, and we got into a shindig in Knoxville, as you're well aware of that. And Farragut on the road, Knoxville on the property, so we didn't let them go in, we didn't let them come into the road. You can't get a right of way, you can't even get a driveway, because they regulate that so stiff. And we've got Myers Road going through here, and you know the planning, the partnership is going to eventually take the rest of that property up there. And they would like to come out on that Myers Road. And one way to regulate that is if it was in the city limits, then we could regulate the ingress and egress off Myers Road. Or any others.
And how do we go about that, Bill?
You can get all the municipalities, a lot of municipalities that do that, and they will go with the county and incorporate that into the city. There's no taxes on it, so there's nothing to worry about.
So you'd have to work with the county.
But you have to work with the county and bring that into the city, but it will regulate the ingress and egress of some of these county roads that are wanting to come into the city.
We may have to pick up the maintenance on the roadway, but would you, instead of the county doing it, but the advantages of that being the roadway may be beneficial.
Yeah, you don't want to do the whole county up here, but they got certain roads that we would like to have. And it regulates and helps with the utilities on those right-of-ways also.
Okay, that's a very good suggestion. We'll look into that. Okay.
I was told, we have our right-of-way that you're not supposed to park on or stuff like that. I was told that the state or the county doesn't feel like they're going to bother to enforce it. And I would like for our city government to contact them and tell them that we still want that enforced. They're not doing anything about it, they're just letting it go intentionally, was what I was told. And I think we need the commissioners and the city government to contact them and get them to start enforcing it.
I think we have talked with TDOT over time about that. Generally what I've heard, this doesn't mean we can't initiate that type of discussion, is that it's a resource issue for them. It's just bandwidth in terms of being able to enforce all the things along the right-of-way. So we do have the ability, and it will be, I think, more explicit when we have this, updated arrangement with TDOT to be able to take enforcement action ourselves. But what I hear you saying, Mary Kay, is we ought to ask them to do it.
We ought to ask them to enforce it or ask them for permission for us to enforce it. It needs to be enforced.
I think it's the latter is the direction we're going, because we've heard that they don't have bandwidth for the former. And we already do. So Mr. Ogle already enforces things quite a lot in the right-of-way. Of course, he's got bandwidth too, and so we have to have, enforcement priorities for him. So.
Some businesses in town tell us they have permission to park on the right-of-way because their parking lots aren't big enough.
Yeah. Well, we're going to clarify that. So this is one of the things that's coming up once we, TDOT has been going through a bid process to allow property owners to buy back parts of the right-of-way. And that process has been completed at this point. And so we will have to get a map so that we understand where property owners have bought back the right-of-way and where some of that right-of-way that is public use. And so right now, there may be sections of the right-of-way that are actually considered to be public use, and we'll need to make sure that those are marked so that people know that, parking is available for the public. And where property owners have that, they can, exercise all their rights on their property, and then what is on the right-of-way, will follow all the right-of-way rules.
Can our city request that the state no longer allow any of that property to be sold, that it stays as a greenway in our city?
I think they've already completed that process, in my understanding.
I have one other question, and then I'll stop. I see this bill by Stinnett, and what he read, what Mr. Jenkins read, and what it says. I want to know what our city commissioners are going to do to get this bill stopped. Because if this isn't stopped, we're going to be taken over.
Okay. Now, I addressed that during the planning commission, so I shared what we knew and what we're doing about it.
What are we going to do about it?
Well, I said it at the planning commission, but I'm happy to
Mary
go
Kay
over
was
it
a
again.
few minutes late coming in.
What?
I said Mary Kay was a few minutes late coming in.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're welcome, ma'am.
What is the city doing about the proposed legislation? Given its recent introduction, we're studying the text and analyzing its impact on Townsend. And I mentioned some of the impacts that we've identified so far. We're reaching out to our state legislators and county officials, and we're providing information to our citizens and community.
Can we have a timeline on any of that?
Well, we shared it with our planning commission tonight,
Yes.
and I've engaged and asked for an analysis from the city attorney, so we're getting that. Commissioner
Because they're going to
Jenkins
pass it before anything gets done.
has engaged the state legislators, and we have our city council meeting coming up on Tuesday. So that would be a good opportunity to take some additional steps.
Scheduled, or what happens, what's the procedure?
They've already had their first reading.
Okay, now, we took care of this at the planning commission. We'll address it again at the city commission because I wanted to make sure we had time for this workshop. So we will cover it again. You can follow the bills on the Tennessee legislation website, and you can follow day by day what happens to those. So, our citizens were following that and identified that on February the 5th it was introduced. You can call it up on your phone. And this week it went to committee, so it's in the different committees that I covered in my remarks. So,
Mr. Mayor, this, and then I'm going to shut up about that. This came up, we're playing catch-up. This came up well over a year ago.
Yeah.
But we knew it was coming. I was talking to the state senator in here, and he said, it's coming. This is not new. Everybody in town's new, or you didn't know it, you didn't.
I didn't. So I must have been like that. I didn't.
I talked with him, and we're behind, but it's not impossible. There's still been an uphill battle.
okay. I'm sure I'll have lots more citizen input between now and Tuesday, and we'll take it up again on Tuesday. So,
I do have one about the right-of-way.
okay.
When Yonder got approved, we said, hey, what about Indian remains on the right-of-way, or where you're digging your driveway, or where you're digging your septic? And we didn't have a way to tell them what to do other than go talk to the state. It seems like we should have something in writing that directs people on what to do, even if it's, it just seems like we need to have something on the books on how to deal with that.
I think we could develop that through that process. We did find out what the thing is, but we could develop a
I
fact
think we
sheet or
should.
something
That way it won't get
for
lost.
developers. The fact is, if you are a developer and you want to do a road cut, then there are certain things that you have to do as part of that. If it's in the right of way, there's certain things that you have to do. And then if it's on private property, there's not much that you are required to do.
I think we need to make that.
But we could develop a fact sheet on that, so I think that would be really important, just to help guide folks. Okay, anything else that we want to add? We're going to, in about 5 minutes or less, we're going to start to prioritize some of these things. Anything else that people want to put on, commissioners?
I have one thing that's in my head, I don't know if it's something we need to address or not, but there is like a new zone where they can put a bunch of people in a house. And it's like, you can separate a house and what is that zone? It's like X or, like it's kind of, I've seen it in Maribel where it has a sign on it. And it says that you have this kind of zoning. And they take every room and divide it into bedrooms.
We got R2,
It's something different.
multifamily, but it might be something different, Kim?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but where you're allowing an existing structure to be subdivided into.
Yeah. a
Where
bunch
you
of
can
homes.
like sell or rent out a room instead of
Small
like a
little
whole.
apartments inside of a home. I have seen it done in
Yeah.
homes.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
So we need to
they're
be
a
careful.
home,
Yeah.
that they turn them in, they'll take 2 or 3 rooms and actually turn them into an apartment with a bathroom, a sink, and a bedroom.
Exactly.
In multiple, in a home
I
that
mean,
has
it's
multiple rooms.
basically,
Yes, yes, we do have that
It's
here.
called Laughing Horse.
What's
And
it?
in
It's
here,
called
we
Laughing
have,
Horse.
we reference boarding and rooming houses.
but I think what
It's a
you're
little
talking,
different.
you're talking about an existing R1 building, for example, that the owner can subdivide it and make it into a, basically into an accessory dwelling unit that they can rent out.
Yeah.
So let's say they don't use the basement anymore, they can retrofit it and rent it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're putting like 8 bedrooms in a home, or, you know, like they're adding.
And it's got something that says they have a certain zoning type?
Yeah, I've heard of it on
Yeah, we
TV, I
have-
watched a YouTube video, but I've seen it in Maryville where the sign said, this has this kind of zoning.
This
Like,
is
oh,
a-
that must be that kind of zoning.
We have R2 high-density residential. And underneath that is boarding and rooming houses. So that would be the same, even though that's
Like a boarding or
antiquated.
rooming house.
That's antiquated verbiage, but it is a
Right.
boarding
It's
or.
the same concept.
Yes, and it
Okay.
is under R2 high-density residential.
R2 high density, okay, we can take a look at that, and see if that needs to be updated or modernized. So
Yeah,
things-
that would be very
okay,
nice.
boarding house.
And I've been thinking about this, a site plan for each thing, instead of one site plan, and then we kind of morph it into different things. Like you were saying, that the Native American, if it's a residential, you don't do that. If it's a driveway, or, commercial, you do. So if we could look at the site plans and massage them to fit all these different ones, instead of trying to make one fit all.
So a site plan for R1, a site plan for R2, a site plan for R3.
Template.
Yeah, the
Check
Native
each one rather
American
than
kind of
making
sparked
one,
my
trying to fit them all.
I mean, checklist.
On the
Yes.
checklist.
You only develop site plans for business.
I meant checklists.
But I think they need to be for all, just like a lot of communities. They have a site plan checklist for R1, they have one for B1, they have one for
A
R2.
checklist for site plan.
Just keeps the planning commission from guessing what they have to do.
Okay.
It's very methodical.
Let me make sure that I understand this suggestion, because we already have a site plan checklist for B1. And I
Oh, we
think
have
it's for-
one.
It's up for all business, right?
B1, B2, B3.
It's a single list. That's it.
We don't do site plans for residential development, we leave that to the building codes enforcer.
Subdivision regulations should not be on the list for new.
Okay, okay.
Just a suggestion.
Let me make sure I've captured this suggestion.
Right.
So the suggestion is to do what?
Like for instance, with Mr. Ackards, we didn't have loading zones, right? Because his was a live work. So it was an NA. So massage this is just a suggestion
Okay,
to,
I'm trying to capture.
yeah.
So it would
we
be
have
a
one that fits
specific
all.
one for B1,
Yeah.
a different one for B2, and a different one for B3.
And some might be the very same thing. It might be the
They
same
have
thing.
same line items, but they might have additional ones, or they might not have some of the same.
And how can you keep up with what is needed here and not there?
Specialize for B1 versus B2 versus B3. Okay, I got it. And you're
And like
suggesting
you're-
this might also be for residents?
I'm suggesting we think about it,
'Cause
so
here-
that's part of the discussion.
A drainage plan is on the checklist, but we did not require one for Mr. Acker.
You know, in brainstorming, they say no idea be rejected. And so, site templates for residential site plans.
Isn't that my job, though, to do the
It may be,
site plan for the residential stuff?
Yeah.
some municipalities don't do it that way, so that's the reason
Okay.
we should think about it.
And so that would, and who would review these residential site plans if not the buildings?
Well, would it not help
2 weeks in
him?
a row. So,
Would it not help him
Site plan
as
should be
well
according
to review? I mean, the checklist is not bad. It's not bad.
You've got some money.
So even if we don't do residential,
I got it captured here.
Okay.
Site plans for residential would be reviewed by the planning commission. I think we can assign that to city council. And that's currently a responsibility of the building inspector. Okay, all right. We're right on time. I told my wife we'd end at 8:30, but we'll go as long as we
I'm
need.
coaching a return to be late.
Okay, last call for any ideas, and then we're going to try to prioritize a little bit.
I still want to go on record saying we need a foundation to build on. And how can we do new things if we don't know what we already have? So I still say we should go back to what we have and then build on that. I'm going to say that over and over.
I think that's right. So part of what is important to do is to maintain continuity. So there's a lot of thought that have already gone into our zoning regulations.
Yes.
And I've been really impressed sometimes when we've got in one of these long discussions about what we think is a unique situation, and we actually sit down and read it,
It's already there.
it's already covered. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we do need to know what's in there.
Yep.
And so if it says downlighting, we should know what's in there already.
Yes.
And if it's just a matter of enforcing it, then we can put that on the list for priorities for enforcement. But we do need to take some deeper dives into this. And this is a nice thing about having all of us around the table. The other thing, and I appreciate Commissioner Hedrick's suggestion to do this, is when one group sends it to the other group, it doesn't sort of bounce back and forth. We know that this is, we're the only people that are doing this. And so if something comes from planning to city council knows what it's about. If it gets bumped to BZA, well, the BZA kind of knows what it's about. So this is the first time we've had a workshop like this, and so I'm grateful to have everybody around the table. It was a good idea. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I've got about 20 things or more on this list. Let me roll through some of these and see if any of these are sort of things that we can do short term, and then we'll come back and try to tackle some of the bigger ones. Does that sound all right? Okay, this one about municipal code and the planning commission, I think that one's already on a track to do that. So we'll be looking at that at the city council level. So I don't think that that's necessarily one we need to continue to, it's already got its own track. B1, B3. So I've got a suggestion here to add back residential, to pull out campgrounds, and to do a complete overhaul. It probably would be an easy idea to, I'm assuming when you say pull out campgrounds, you mean put them back in B1 because they're more like tourism, like a hotel.
I think they're on
Or
zone.
hotels, when you say campgrounds.
Well,
See, I think campgrounds is its own zone.
Yeah, make
or
it
have a
zone.
separate zone for
Right.
campgrounds.
So that,
And I'm educated, campgrounds and RV parks is the same
Yes.
sort of thing. Okay.
And here's just a thought, when we're talking about campgrounds
Old
real
boxes
quick.
up on hill posing as a hotel.
Okay. Okay, so we could write a new zoning type that would have campgrounds and RVs in it. Okay, that would take some time, but that sounds like pretty good. What about adding residences back into B1 and B3?
Yes,
I
that's
think we
what
can
I'm
do
saying.
that pretty quickly.
And
Okay,
that way
I'm going to put
if-
that down as a...
Because citizens are concerned that if their house burns down, they can't build it back. And so by doing this, if their house burns down, they will be able to build it back even though it's in a B1. Is that correct?
Okay,
Yes.
a new zone on that.
Why would we want to build a house in a high-intensity business district like B3?
Well, if there's already a house that exists and it burns down, they would want to rebuild on their footprint, possibly, if they own that property with inside.
That's true, but we don't have any B3 within the houses.
Or in the future, if there's a B3 and they don't want to build, but they want a house.
we can look at
I
it.
mean, this is the discussion we had when we took them out, is that residences are not compatible with high-intensity business operations, or maybe even tourism. So there was a whole discussion, and we intentionally took them out. But, I'm a little bit more persuaded now that we ought to look for every opportunity to fit the people who live here.
I think we gotta look at
If
policy.
you go and build a house in a high-intensity business zone, well, you know that your neighbors might be
Loud.
one of these types of permitted uses.
And if they have a house. they
There
can
won't be
rebuild
any
it.
Might be enforcement possibilities like normal.
There can't be any B3s.
what you all, the way that you all articulated to keep the first one to come in, that is blanket on every request going forward.
I think people hold that view, John, and it may be accurate, but it was our first time in trying to use the B3. And, you know, we did have a number of questions that we had to address on that. And so, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say that B3 is unworkable, but I'm not, there's other people that say that it's, and I think that's your point. But if you took what we learned in that go-around with the B3, I think, you know, having some sort of a business district where you've got higher intensity uses could work. But there are, you know, there is a argument to be made that what you've done is you put all the undesirable uses in a certain category, and they're never going to get past the city council because they're perceived as being undesirable uses. Well, we have to broaden our thinking from that. Just like where we started this discussion, we can't prohibit those types of uses necessarily, but we can get them in the right place and we can put the right provisions around them.
Because we do have an M1 industrial,
We do have M1 industrial.
so
And
we
so-
can move some of those things over there.
You can move them into M1.
So it's clear we need to have a bigger discussion
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
M1, B2.
Because M1
So-
discourages residential development.
All right, so do we think we can add residences back quickly? Do we think we can make a B4 to campground, like a new
I
zoning
still
type?
like to leave campgrounds in B3. If we don't, you don't tighten up your zoning, you're gonna let other things in. The only way to keep from pretty much getting a lawsuit is to have even those undesirable things in place. If we keep campgrounds, then the B3 is pretty packed in that area already. So you're really discouraging, there's not a lot of property to put a big box store in these things.
Okay.
I was told the only way to keep things out is by zoning and make it tight zoning appeals, as in what things look like. You have to have a place for it, but if that's bought up, then
That's right.
you do have a place for them. It's not the city's fault that that property is already purchased at.
Well, that's right, and we do have sort of constrained, I mean, we're small. and
Right.
So we have to be thoughtful about where we have what. Mr. Akers?
So, not having residents permitted in B1 is atrocious. You should add that back, because that's what most of the zone is now, and it's not high-density business type of thing. It's houses right now. You should do that. You should be real careful about your B3, because when there is a B3 zone, anybody else that qualifies with the same conditions, they're automatically going to whip you when you try to tell them no. It will go to court and they'll whip you because it's spot zoning if you let one of them do it and somebody else that meets the same qualifications not do it. So you got to be really, really, really careful when you give that first B3 property existing. So having the campgrounds in a separate zone would help you tremendously, because all of those other permitted uses in B3, if you make those campgrounds B3, all of those, everything that's listed is non-stoppable. You can't stop it if somebody sees it written there and it goes to court. Doesn't matter how many of you vote against it, the court's gonna whip your tail.
But you still have to have a place, they have to have a zoning place to be though. You have to have a place for a Suboxone clinic.
I'm sorry?
I said you still have to have a zoning place for some of these things that are in there. You can't just say, no, we don't want you in here.
That's correct.
So, but you've got to have a place for them zoned, am I correct?
That's correct. And you can set parameters that it's really, really tough for them to.
Massage parlors have nothing to do with sex, I promise you that.
Some do.
I will fight you on that one, I do not, so.
So in rezoning, if you don't meet all of the requirements, you don't have to get rezoned.
Right.
So you could set the zoning requirements for that zone in such a way that nobody that requests being rezoned meets the requirements to stop that zone from happening. But if one of them ever happens, then from then on, everybody that meets those same requirements is going to get that zone, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I heard a little while ago that you want to have your city commission pick your planning commission. I believe the wise thing to do is have the mayor submit a list of names and the city commission confirm them or not confirm them. And that way, when the planning commission says something is the law, the city commission doesn't have a voice in denying it, because that's a personal opinion and liable in court, and I don't think anybody really wants to go and do that. So they do need to be separate. Blount County, that we, as commissioners, we get to approve like 3 of the people that are up there or 4 of the people up there, and whatever they do happens. Now, as commission, we can insist, like currently we're asking them to redo Blount County zoning because of some difficulties I've had here. I've wanted to get Blount County out of the same situation that Townsend's in, because we shouldn't be denying people uses on their property by default. The way Blount County is right now, if our rules don't say you can, then you're not allowed to do it. Well, if you were to try to make a list of the millions of things that you would think somebody ought to be able to do on their property, it's a whole lot easier to make a list of things they can't do on their property. So I'm trying to make Blount County change that from a commission standpoint. I don't have the authority, but we did ask that it be considered by our planning commission, and then if they do anything, will send it back to us for approval. But your commission needs to be separated from that, from a legal standpoint, or you're biting off more than you want to chew on personally when it goes to court, because you'll be named personally if the planning commission said it was legal and you decide to say no. That's a big time no-no.
And I think that's why the state set it up the way it did, is to safeguard the commissioners. The state set that up. That's not something that we chose to set up. The state chose to set it up that way, that the mayor gets to pick, so it safeguards the city commission.
There are other
Some things are not
municipalities in
healthy, some are
Tennessee.
undesirable, and some should be excluded.
There's a couple of different models, and we'll put one forward and talk about it at our city council meeting. Let me move on to a couple of other things that might be quick things that we could do. How about the noise ordinance? Does anybody believe it's quick to be able to put in content neutral thresholds?
Well, it would just be deciding on the decimals. If we're gonna go by
We already
Of course, even with the decibel.
But we have a chart already.
Why is it hard to enforce?
As an engineer,
The noise level can vary, and they can cut music up. If it's music, and they can cut it down, and the police are running back and forth. It's a real risk.
It's a resource issue in terms of being able to enforce it. But if you have something on the books, it's an objective way, if you have something that's particularly egregious. If I want to take my chainsaw out and run it 24/7, you actually have something that you can use to address it. But then it becomes related to how much bandwidth do we have for enforcement.
But to relate to zoning, you shouldn't have a nightclub with music next to a residential area.
Okay.
And that's a zoning
I'm
matter.
going to put a Q on that. All right, what about the lighting ordinance? Is that a quick one we can do?
The word's already there.
Or we think the lighting
It's already
ordinance is
there.
good?
no, I think it needs some revision, but I think it's quick.
Yeah.
Mike and I spent a lot of time working on that back in 2010, and I think it could be massaged a little bit.
Okay,
We perfected it.
it's pretty good already,
It's
but,
just student testifying.
So I think just some massaging, so I think it can be quick.
okay. Driveway already has a path that's on that. Let me come to some of these other ones. How about building permit? making a closing time for the building permit, boy, that sounds quick.
Yes,
Okay, put a Q on that one. Let's see. How about amending the B123 zoning with a line that references that the land use and transportation plan should be kept in mind?
yes.
That sounds like a quick one. The sign ordinance, feather signs, vinyl signs, is that the quick one we can do?
Yes, we need to get that one done quickly before all the trucks come
I
in.
think it's quick to do the ordinance. I think what will take some time and thought is the enforcement on it.
What trucks?
Huh? Food trucks with the feather signs, if we're gonna allow those or not.
No, they're not permitted, that, they've got a very limited amount of signage on the vehicle, and the sign on their board and nothing else.
Okay, well, we can go back through and be
Then that-
explicit where we need to be
Right, and then that needs
explicit
to
about.
be in the application that those are not allowed, when we give out the applications that those feather signs are not allowed.
How much signage they can.
Okay.
For instance, like Mike
All
and
right.
Ginger in front of
All right.
IGA,
Those-
they have their signs.
They're not
Okay,
allowed to have feather signs, that's.
I've got 6 things that look like we could do them pretty quickly.
Whose responsibilities are those, planning or
All right.
city commission? Let's figure out whose
Yeah,
responsibility.
let's go ahead and assign that. So adding the residential back to B1, that would be planning. Noise ordinance would be city commission. Lighting ordinance, planning. That's where that resides. Building permit, closing time, that's planning. Reference to land use transportation plan in the B123, that's planning. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. And feather signs, that's city council.
I can't wait to see you define feather.
We got 3 pages of definition of signs, surely we can come up with something that's appropriate. Okay, now, let's go back to some of these other things. Semi-rigid structures in campgrounds. That hasn't come up again in a while, but is that anything that we need to prioritize?
This is my thought on that. When Don Hedrick spoke about campgrounds, in favor of campgrounds, he said that, you know, the population is changing and they want to sleep in their own bed.
Right.
Putting cabins in campgrounds, they are no longer sleeping in their own bed. Putting cabins in campgrounds takes away from our hotels, because they would be staying in a hotel instead of a cabin in a campground. Also, the cabins that are already in campgrounds have more value because they are grandfathered. So my opinion, going forward, campgrounds should be campgrounds. Thought process, we're supporting the hotels.
What about a yurt?
No, that's rigid, semi-rigid, no. You know, a tent, a camper, you know, a tent, a RV,
It just went, you're out of the air, I'm sorry, I thought that was great.
well, no, that's a semi-rigid.
Right, it is, I know, but it's just.
Yeah, so that's my thought. I'm
Is
just one
this
person.
something that's a big problem? I mean, we had one fella come and ask the question, but I haven't heard any questions. Yeah. I'm going to say, let's put this one a little bit lower down on the list. We'll keep it on the list, but we'll keep that one. We can't do everything all at once, so we do have to make some choices about how we're going to spend our time. Overnight rentals, registration, and licensing. Commissioner Jenkins, you've raised this one before. And this is something that's an evolving trend in our community. Is this something that needs to get our attention?
I think it needs to get our attention, because one way you control where it is or how many there are is to have very strict regulations about what they have to conform to. And I'm going to make these things up. You could make some rule that they have to have sprinkler systems. You could make some rule that they can't have more than 3 cars in the driveway. You could make a rule you can't have a vehicle more than 26 feet long. All these different kinds of things. They have to pass health department rules. All these kinds of things help you control how many and where they have to be. So I think that we could look at that. Now, if you don't care where they are, then you don't make any rules.
Where does that fit on our priority list?
I don't think we're fresh on it right now. We've got some other things to do.
We do require a permit, but where's your release for that? You know? No
And
one's
that's a
checking.
very good point.
Out
I
of
think
our-
we've got a bunch of stuff on the books that we don't need on there. That we've got rules that you can't serve alcohol in an establishment that has a billiard table, still on the books. We've got one, you have to be served a meal with a beer. And I argued at the time, there's no way to police those types of things, so they don't need to be on the books, and we don't need to waste our time and resources policing.
Yeah.
Can you still not whistle on the sidewalk?
That's in the noise ordinance. Whistling
As
is
long
in
as you're not
the noise
carrying a
ordinance.
record player, you can do that.
Okay, so we didn't really cover this, but it's a good point. Are there things that are on the books? I mean, it's quick to take these things out. Maybe it's quick.
Yeah, that would be easy.
We're out of time, but let's put that on for another discussion. We can have it at the city commission, and folks can bring suggestions on things that could be.
Well, to that point, someone said earlier, we break it down into, we're covering 801 through, or 8-201 through 8-204, and be very specific, so that we,
Like, when Margaret
Well,
came,
We
did that with the municipal code.
yeah.
Yeah, we could just take a walk through different sections of the code. I was trying to be responsive to Commissioner Hedrick's suggestion that, you know, while we're waiting for the community plan, there are things that we
Right.
can just
They can get
target
Which
and.
we did this with the municipal code. We went through a section at a time and read through it and rechanged the verbiage. It took us a couple of workshops, but we actually went through this whole book and changed verbiage in it.
When was that?
It was,
it's probably time to do it again too, or the way it's changed.
But science was still on. No, it wasn't that. We just finished this. This was just
well, we
your
just started
end.
back, yeah.
Yeah.
We guys had it for 3 years compiling it.
Yeah, so it was about 3 years ago.
Okay. Well,
And we did have the city charter run back through state legislation to change the charter and all.
well, let's think about that. That sounds like a sort of a different direction than we were asked to do at this meeting, but it doesn't sound like a bad idea.
It'll need to be done at some point.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, that's why we put the document up online. So please visit it, make your comments there. One of the reasons why we want it in one place, together with this meeting, we will sit down with our staff and figure out how to have a workshop series that we walk through each of these documents.
And so you've done this for the zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our zoning ordinance is online, it's already got markups from the staff.
Exactly.
If we all mark it up, then we'll have it all.
So you can tell what things have been changed?
Yes.
No, but things were wanting to change.
No?
I want to change.
Comments on the side.
Wait. The one, you've gone through it, and you've made some tweaks, for lack of a better word?
No.
No, you haven't made any tweaks?
No.
Okay, well, let me wait, because what Gayla gave me and what I got today from you online, there's differences.
Yes.
And so we don't know when or who.
There will always be changes because the idea is that everybody should provide comments to the document. So the changes will be dynamic all the time. The only thing that was changed, that was actually physically changed,
Okay,
was the identification of each of the amendments.
okay.
Everything else
So for me.
are just comments.
Okay, so for me to know that, you've got them color coded, so I'll know that, or do I have to compare it word for word?
Let me
Okay, we're gonna do this exercise, as part of the community plan
Yes.
update, and that's how we're gonna go through the zoning ordinance.
Also, just a side note, 8-607, that should be 8-608, does not have B3 in it.
Okay.
Let me just repeat
Make a
that.
note on that one.
There is no change in the content. They are just comments added to the document. That's it.
Okay. Now, let's continue through our list here, because I think we're starting to land some of these things. let's go to developing a guidance fact sheet for the cultural heritage. Is that something that we have bandwidth to do?
I don't think there's a lot of demand for it right now, so for that reason, you could put it off.
Keep it on the list, but make it a medium priority.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I'm putting an M by that one. Multifamily R2 boarding house. Review that regulation. Is that?
Just make sure that we don't fall into that trap. We want to make sure.
We already, we allow it.
Is that?
Oh, we allow it.
Right
I
now.
don't think you don't have to.
It's called co-living. I just looked it up and then it's like congregate.
Co-living, congregate housing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, is this a priority? Is this something we need to pay attention to right now?
I think it could easily be part of the B1, B2, B3 discussion. You're just adding another description.
This is our,
Oh,
this is our.
okay.
It's already in there.
Well, it may come
Well,
up as a way to house employees,
Well-
possibly.
Yeah. What we need to do is
But
to
it's
have.
happening now already.
Right. Oh, it's happening. We have a lot of things that are happening. Is this something we need to pay attention to right now?
I think so, yeah. I think
Is it, could it be quick? Can
Why
we?
not, if we can have.
Maybe we can see if it can be quick.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna put a Q on that one. And owners of this one will be the planning commission. So the chair may decide to task
Christina, you're gonna get
some
those-
citizens to review and give us recommendations.
I'll get the building permit.
ChatGPT.
I'll get the building permit.
All right, okay, now let's see, templates, specialized checklist for B1 versus B2 versus B3.
I think it's important, and I don't think it's that hard to do.
Yeah.
You think it'll be quick?
I think it'll be quick.
Putting a Q, Jenkins and Bunk.
Bunk and
Okay,
Jenkins.
we'll do it.
Okay. Templates for residential site plans. Now, this sounds like something that's already being covered by the building inspector. Is it a high priority? This would help, we would do this to be able to help people that are building R1, R2, R3 houses. I feel a little bit disadvantaged by not having the building inspector here to talk about it.
Well, let's just put that at medium right now.
Put it at medium.
Is there a problem? I just, I don't
I
have
think it's doing a good job.
I think it
What
could
it's
help
doing.
document why you approved this guy and why I didn't approve this guy.
Okay.
Okay? And it'll help the building inspector, or the
And
codes
like you
guy,
said,
say,
Clear.
here it is.
when someone comes in, you can give them a list of what they need.
Okay. Where did we land on overnight rentals, registration, and licensing?
I think that's hard to do.
How do we
I think
enforce
Hard
there's
to
a lot of
do.
detail.
How do we enforce it?
So it's not quick.
Hard to do, okay. Okay, but we'll keep it on the list, but we might have to seek out additional help because it's hard. Corridor management plan. Our city planner has suggested we ought to take a look at corridor management plan. Is that going to come back up in the planning commission at a certain point?
Yeah, as I had a meeting with Michael before this meeting.
Okay.
I am going to be talking to the state to figure out what the process is to try and get this started. What I'm worried about, as I mentioned to him, is that with all the executive orders on federal funding, I don't know if that's going to
I can't understand.
come.
Can you speak up?
I have to use a microphone, I can't.
I was saying that I'm going to work to fast track what is possible for the corridor management plan. And that will include figuring out if there's funding to get it done and what the process is to engage a firm to do it. So that's basically what I'm going to try and figure out. If there's money, given the executive orders that have come out about federal funding, and what the process is to actually engage engage it.
Okay, now I'm probably not the only person here, but what is involved in a corridor management plan?
An example is what is happening in the city of Loudon. Loudon has a corridor management plan covering Highway 72 and the downtown area. So basically, it's a comprehensive transportation plan. Typically, it addresses a thoroughfare that is under threat of overdevelopment or unplanned development. So, for example, in Loudon, there was Loves that wanted to come in, Loves wanted to argue for traffic lights and egress and ingress into their site in one form of fashion.
Okay.
The engineers went in there and figured out why and where, and so that some regulations could be put in place to allow for that growth.
I understand a little bit better.
My understanding is that the situation we're in now is ad hoc. Anybody who wants a road cut, driveway, something, they just go to TDOT. TDOT looks at them sort of one by one. This is a more intentional plan.
I have a better idea.
I think this probably goes back to the planning commission. The community plan folks struggled with this one. I talked to Chairman Hoke about this, and I think this is better at the planning commission.
Yeah, what I've mentioned in the past is that the corridor management study will be, if like, let's say you have a spaceship and something detaches to go on a different trajectory, that's what will happen with the corridor management plan. It will be a separate thing engaged by an engineering firm with an elaborate, extensive process outside of the CPAC process.
Okay.
Eventually.
Okay. All right, guys, I think we've landed most of these. Commissioner Hedrick, you were taking such good notes. Is there anything there that I missed? Any ideas? You feeling comfortable that we've covered it all, or?
Well, longer term, whatever, and then we've got mobile home and then occupying an RV.
Mobile home and occupy an RV.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take mobile home. That's a map. We have regulations on the books, and ETPD is going to give us some advice on what we need to do to update that, and that'll come to planning commission.
Yes, yes.
Pilings and underpinning.
Exactly.
Pilings and underpinning. Okay. All
I
right.
recommend you define occupy.
Okay, now, finally, Mr. Baker, modifying the exceptions for prohibition to allow folks to occupy an RV on their own property.
Anywhere in the city.
Is that what you're saying?
No.
Anywhere?
Is that what you're saying?
I'm asking y'all the question.
That was.
It was one of the ideas that we brainstormed, and so far, I've mentioned this at several meetings. Mr. Akert has brought it up, and I've mentioned it at Planning Commission, I've mentioned it at City Council. I have not heard any appetite for undertaking a change in this prohibition to allow folks to occupy an RV in the city.
It seems to me there would have to be some other specifications. For instance, can I just pull up into the field and every time I want to drive in with my RV, it's parked out there, I drive in wherever I want to go? Do we have to have improvements like a driveway? Does it have to have, so that would be something to consider, because otherwise it's just an empty lot and somebody's parked their RV on it.
How many RVs?
Exactly, how many RVs and
do we want that?
And how many people are going to Airbnb their RV?
That's right.
Airbnb the RV. I've asked the question, but I have not heard general consensus.
I like how it stands at the moment.
Notwithstanding.
I like how it stands at the moment.
Okay.
My opinion.
I think it's
I do too.
Okay. We can keep it on the list, but it does not seem to be getting a priority at this time. So, but I'm grateful for the input. Okay, commissioners, committee members, thank you so much for participating in this workshop. I will write this up and share it with you all to make sure that it reflects your input. And then we will task these things as we've discussed to the City Council or to the Planning Commission as appropriate and try to make some progress on it. Some of these things we can try to get done quickly, some will take a little bit longer.
Can you add one more thing, please?
Okay?
This would not probably come in the form of an ordinance or anything, but I think a workshop on our emergency and disaster plan.
Absolutely, absolutely.
In
Future-
case we get-
I have a meeting scheduled with Condi and Stallions. Did you watch the video? From MTask about that, did you sit in on that?
Yeah, I was in that webinar.
Okay,
Yes.
well, they will, if you want to.
I've got 6 pages.
Yeah, I have pages of that, so we could just sit down and talk to Stallions and Connie. Stallions, I had talked to about him this week, but I think we're gonna wait till 2 weeks out, because he's out of town this weekend, just to sit down and discuss from things that we have learned over the years, and things we can implement that are already there.
I think this is a very, very high priority, and I would be pleased for Commissioners Satterfield and Martin to take that forward. Okay.
Can't really do too much on that, it's like muscle training, you want to be able to react.
Yeah.
And then they react very well. And we've had our OCs in here multiple times. There was just some things that, that I saw being in the OC multiple times, that we could tweak a little bit and make, better use of some things that we have here available to us. So it was just some little tweaking things.
The webinar was very
It was very
insightful
good.
and very helpful.
Yeah.
We need to pay attention to this. You know, I'm still thoughts and prayers to our, friends and neighbors on the other side of the mountain. And, but for the grace of God, that could have been
Shifted.
us. We were watching that weather very carefully. So, thank you all for doing it. And thank you all for attending the workshop and all the awesome ideas. We're grateful, and this will help our city so much. So, we're adjourned.